Hi students, you're going to be working with the same file that you did for exercise 3B. We're now going to be moving into exercise 3C. So go ahead and launch that file, last name, your last name, underscore AI3B, and we're going to go ahead and quickly save that as last name underscore AI3C. Okay, you'll do this often. I want you to get used to this kind of stuff in the industry where whenever you're working, you might base a project on something that you had before and you want to just quickly change file names. Go ahead and say save. Save it somewhere that you'll remember. And what you're going to do now is you're going to make sure that the name layer is locked, like we had done in the previous video and session. And what you're going to do is select the redraw layer. You want to be on this layer, not the locked layer. And what we're going to do is begin to redraw one of the letters at the end of your first name using the pen tool found on the toolbar. So I'm going to go through how this works. This can be very challenging for some, and you can practice over here up above if you'd like. The pen tool is here. There you have multiple ones that look sort of like the pen tool, but this pen tool here is what you want to use. I know there's other ways you can work with the pen tool, so some of you might want to use other quick ways. The curvature tool might help with the pen tool, but right now we're going to do a basic pen tool. And what's nice about Adobe Illustrator is wherever you hover, it sort of gives you these like tooltip lines. Like where you see here where it says intersect. It really kind of guides you to point and make a path on the critical coordinates that might shape the graphics in which you're working. So for example, if I wanted to center something, we're not doing it for this exercise, but if I wanted to center something on certain coordinates, this would help. These little lines that you see would help. They can become annoying at certain times, so you might want to go up under one way to get rid of them is under your view menu. You can turn off the smart guides, which is what they are. They're smart guides. And this has a check, meaning they're on. I like to have them on. So that's important. Another thing is you might want to turn on the rulers. So under view, rulers, show rulers. That's always important because it does allow you to kind of gauge the size of something and stay within a certain scale. Okay, so the next thing I'd like you to do is get used to the way the pen tool works. So click and see how it sort of guides you before. So there's really no line there, even though it looks like it's invisible. Click and drag. So dragging that made it into a curve, okay? Now what you'll also notice is where I'm going, where I'm hovering, and note that I'm not clicked anymore. I let go. Wherever I'm hovering is where that line is directed to. So if I just click, immediately that curve is going to be there. So I'm going to do a Control Z to undo. But if this direction handle goes away, I might have a little more control over that curve. So I'm going to do an Option click. And then look, I can really determine, click and drag and let go. Option click. Go here, click and drag, let go. Option click, click and drag, option click. Whoops, option click. Click and drag, option click, click and drag, option click, click and drag, option click, click and drag, option click. And I keep doing this so that you can follow along with me. Click and drag, option click. Okay, so now it's not a closed, it is not closed at all, this path. But what you do see is that it is adding a fill in the curves, and that might be annoying. What you see is this automatically filling in these areas. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my selection tool to get out of there. And now I can move this as one unit graphic, separate. What I want to do is click on it. You can get rid of this by just setting it to none. That is the fill, the foreground fill. We're going to set that to none. Okay, but you want to be able to see it. So we're going to want to give it a stroke, which is an outline. Strokes and outline are the same thing. So it's usually a fill or an outline, a stroke. So we're going to click on the stroke to bring that in front because that's what we want to add a color to. Click on it. And then I'm going to make that a certain color. I can always either double click on it and it'll bring up my color picker, and I'll make it, a bright color, say okay. So it automatically fills it in with a stroke. I think it's a 1-point stroke. Okay, and now this is a path. If you click off of it, that looks like a line, which is great. So we're gonna go ahead and also show you a quick little way of how to close a path. So right now this is just a path, not a shape, okay? Now to create a shape, you would go to the pen tool, and let's say you wanted to do an interesting shape, and you kind of work this way. I'm just kind of working the pen tool. This one I'm not really having to do click, click and drag, option click. And you can always change this afterwards. So whatever you draw isn't the end of the world. Like if I go too far down, it's not the end of the world. I can always go back in and change it. Can always make it better afterwards too. Okay, so I'm just doing this right now. Now I'm going to go ahead and make this a shape. I'm doing this little side tutorial for some of you because this is not really what I expect from your exercise. I only expect what the directions say, but this might help. So I closed this. I started here, I went around, I went all the way around, and I clicked where I began. Okay, now I'm going to go up to my selection tool. Now this is a shape. This is a shape with a stroke. I'm now going to fill it in. I'm going to take the stroke off, click on the stroke, give it none. You won't be able to see it if I click off of it. If I click on it, I'm going to fill it. Again, if I double click with the fill, my color picker comes up. I can do this. I can go to color swatches too. If I don't want to do it the color picker way, we're going to work with that later. I'm going to say okay. So now I've filled that shape with a color. And this is what I want you to do here with one of your characters of your name. Okay, and you can certainly follow along and do work on this and try and get to know how to work with the pen tool, and then submit this file at the end. One other thing I want to point out is if you click and hold down the pen tool, there's an anchor point tool. So for example, if I wanted to change the anchor point in the way that they worked, I might want to go to my selection tool, select something, and let's say I wanted to change the anchor point of something. So I would hover over the anchor point, click on it and drag, and look what happens. Click on it and drag. So if you don't like the shape of something, it needs to be more curved. Of course, you can go to this hover over this curvature tool. That's another thing that you can use. And I'll show you just how to do that. If I now hover over the path, it allows me to then pull that path out in the middle when there hasn't been any kind of points added. It just allows me to work with the curvature of that after the fact, after I've already drew it in. Okay, so there are several different ways that you can work with the pen tool and the curvature tool. And so hopefully that helps you as you build your shapes. Illustrator is a really strong shape building program, and we have a shape builder tool also in here in some of the other programs to help build upon shapes. Okay, so that is that. And the next thing I want you to do, and the main thing I wanted you to do for this particular exercise, was to grab the pen tool, make sure this layer is locked, and then I want you to create a shape around one of your characters. It doesn't really have to be a perfect character. I just want you to option click. I'm going to zoom in now. Zooming in can be Control plus or minus. And now I'm just going to trace right around where that shape is. click and drag, option click. Don't let the fill scare you. It's filling with a color. Click and drag, option click. If you want for the color to be nothing, go ahead and hit this swap fill and stroke, or you can go ahead and default fill and stroke over here to black and white. And then we have an outline. That might help you. I'm going to then fill none. I'm also going to hit the outline none because I don't want to see that black outline right now. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of work around and make a path around a character. Option click, click and drag. You see that direction line handle? You want to get rid of that if you want more control. Option click, or you can let it default and change it later. So click. So I've closed this particular path, and it's okay if you don't have this right here as a compound path. We'll worry about that later. I'm going to click on selection, and now you know that this is a full shape because it's got a bounding box. The next thing you want to do is double click on the fill. Make sure the fill is in front first. Double click on it, and let's make that a bright yellow. I think that's what I had you guys do in the exercise. Say okay. So it's not perfect. I can always adjust it by going to my direct selection tool, clicking on it to see the anchor points. I can go to my curvature tool and sort of pull this out slightly, or I can go to this pen tool, click and hold, go to my anchor point tool and kind of mess with it a little bit to give it more. Or I can just go to my direct selection tool, click and move the anchor points until they fit. Direct selection tool is what I'm in. And sometimes it snaps to the closest area. Okay, so since I don't have a handle here, I might want to add a little more options. And so I go to my, there we go. And then I can, once I go to my anchor point tool, it allows me to work a little better with the anchor points. And I move around. This tends to be an issue too when I delete my handle. I do sometimes go back and want to add a handle. Some people don't like to delete the handles at all. I do that just based on my own experience and how I'm used to working. Okay, so it's not perfect. You can continue to work till it's perfect. It's okay that this this closure is now entirely closed. I just wanted to see that you could create a full shape path shape. Next quick action that I'd like you to do is I'd like you to head up over to the rectangle tool, and I want you to create either a rectangle or a square, doesn't matter to me. And I want you to choose a color that is not yellow for that. Okay. And then I want you to head up to the window in the menu and go ahead and click on Pathfinder. The Pathfinder allows us to do many different things with shapes. And for this particular quick little action, we're going to move it near the character that you created with your pen tool. You're going to select the shape, and then you're going to also hold down Shift and select your character, and you're going to go ahead and unite these. Okay, and so after you unite them, you notice that they both change to the same color. And then that's sort of they're also the same shape. Even if you go to your selection tool, they're sort of the same shape, but what's nice is they still give you some paths within. Okay, so that's it, and go ahead and save your file as last name underscore Ai3c or 3c, file save as Ai3c 3c, and I want you to save it as an Adobe PDF and then submit it. There's no need for compression for this one. Let it default and walk through, no need for compression, and submit it to the JetNet submission link.